So if you've been following my YouTube channel for a while, you probably know that I'm a pretty big fan of the GH5. I've done tons of videos on it. I've talked about it on Wedding Film School. I've talked about it on my Instagram. I've talked about it behind the scenes. We've been using them for about 18 months and we absolutely love them. But about 9 months ago, I did a video all about my settings, and a lot has changed since that video, specifically in the picture profile department. So I wanted to do an update, let you know how I'm shooting these days and why I'm shooting the way that I do. A lot of you have been saying really nice things about some of the footage from our wedding films, and so I wanted to help in any way that I can and tell you about the profile we're using, why we switched to it, and hopefully it'll help you as well. So we're gonna get straight into it, and let's first go over picture profile. So for about the first 3 to 6 months that we had the GH5, we shot in this Cine D profile. We really liked what we got out of it. We felt like it was a nice image out of camera. It was nice and gradable, and we used that and we're pretty happy with it. And then as we started to mess around with a few different LUTs and a few different styles of color that we were going for, we found that it didn't do exactly what we wanted. We thought it had a little bit more noise than we preferred in the shadows, and we were looking for an even better out of camera image, because as we did more of our films, the less work we had to spend getting them to look good first, the less work it was when we wanted to add a LUT to it and make it look even better. So we changed to a natural profile. And at first we changed to the natural profile. We didn't like the settings whatsoever, so we started to mess around with it, tweak it quite a bit, watch a few different wedding filmmakers, what they were doing, and we came across a profile that we really love, and we've been using now for about the last 9 months. Very simply, it's all based on the natural profile. So when you go in your profile settings and you bring up the natural profile, the best thing to do right away is go to natural by default, make it all blank, and then just hit display and save, and it will ask you to save it on a new profile, and then you can create the custom profile that I'm going to show you on right now. And our settings are pretty simple. In the natural profile, we have the contrast all the way down at -5. We have the sharpness at 0. We have the noise reduction at -4, the saturation at -2, and the hue at -1. So that is exactly how we have it set up. What it does in this profile is gives you a very nice out of camera clean image. The skin tones look really nice. It can be usable without doing any color grading whatsoever. But then depending on the different LUTs you use and the different color settings that you're going for, it also can be graded really nicely while still keeping really good skin tones. So that's what we use for our picture profile. Pretty simply, I'll put all that in the description as well. See what you think about it. Next up, button configuration. This is super important to us. We'd love to be able to hit buttons and get places quickly and not have to mess around with menus to switch between things that we use all the time. This main shutter button, of course, records video. That's always the button we press. We never press this button for video. This is always what we press to actually record. That's pretty common. You got your white balance, your ISO, your aperture exposure compensation. That's all default. The FN1 button, the very first button that we have customized, we have as X teleconverter. That allows us, obviously, if you're not familiar with that, X teleconverter allows you to jump into, I believe, 1.7 times or maybe 2 times, but regardless, you jump in quite a bit. We have that set right here, so at the push of a button, we can simply jump in and crop in on the image. Now you can't do that while you're recording, it has to be before you record, but it's nice just having it there. We use that quite a bit because we use all prime lenses. It allows us to change focal lengths without losing any quality, and it's just a super rad addition that we have. I never said the word rad before. Not sure why that even came. So that's FN button 1. FN button 2 we have as our peaking. We use this all the time. We obviously shoot in full manual focus when we're shooting with the GH5s, so we always like to have peaking there, and we obviously turn peaking on and off depending on what we're shooting, only if we want to quickly check color. We always have peaking on when we're actually shooting, but every once in a while we'll pop it off if for some reason we feel like it's messing with our eyes, just for visual of looking at the color. We do change the peaking color here and there, but for the most part our peaking color is set at blue, dark blue, and that's what we like. We feel like it's easy to see in any situation. So the FN3 button we actually have routed as the waveform, and we do not use this all the time, but we do pop it up every once in a while if we feel like maybe our eyes are telling us something different than we see. That'll give us obviously good exposure, but even when that is off, we always have the histogram up right here, which is really helpful to just make sure that we don't have anything affecting whether our exposure is on or off. Sometimes if you're outside, it can be really bright. You'll think your exposure is underexposed or overexposed. So we really like to use that as kind of our default. Make sure that it is showing up correct so that you get good exposure. That's vital. The FN4 button down below here we have set up as the motion picture record quality, which basically just allows us to change all the settings: 4K 60, 1080 and 180 frames, 240 frames, 4K 10-bit. All your settings there. It just allows us to change really quickly. The FN5 button right here we have routed as our IS lock, and that allows us to simply press that button and have near tripod-like experience handheld, which is just an unbelievable feature in the GH5 that we use constantly because we're shooting more and more stuff handheld, but it's nice that we can just press the button and lock in real quick with no problem whatsoever. This button up here we use a ton. This is the AF/AE lock button, but we actually have it routed as AF on. And all that essentially means for us is that when we have this lens on, or any lens that can actually be controlled focus from the camera, what this allows us to do is when we're shooting in manual mode and we press that button, it instantly will lock in focus on whatever grid we have selected, and we'll just lock in to exactly what we point at in focus, and then it stays in manual focus. So it's a really quick way to be bouncing around and just press that, lock into your focus, and then continue to focus. Or you can just pop this clutch back with our lenses and it allows us to manually focus that way too. Really, really helpful. We use that constantly. The GH5 does not have good continuous autofocus, but it has good regular autofocus. So using that is really useful. The button on the very front here of the camera, right by the lens, I actually have routed right now as the AF on button as well. That way, if I'm holding it like this, I can just press it even easier. I will actually change this button pretty often depending on what I'm shooting, what type of work I'm shooting. I may sometimes put that as the IS lock. Every once in a while, I may have it as the AF on. I may have it in some additional features that I may be using on that specific job. I don't use that button nearly as much as the rest of them because there's enough buttons that I have customized whatever I want to be custom. On our little wheel here, we have these 4 buttons set accordingly. The very bottom button, when you press that in, we have as auto white balance, just in case we suddenly need to get a shot out of nowhere and our white balance is crazy off. If we just quickly hit it into auto white balance and get a shot real quick, that's convenient. 95% of the time we're obviously controlling the white balance ourselves, but every once in a while some shot pops up and I'd rather get it close, and auto white balance does a really good job on the GH5, so we just like having that button right there. So when you press that, that's auto white balance. When you press to the left, that's actually your tungsten fluorescent light. So that'll be in a typical room, so maybe something like this where it's obviously really orange. That'll really cool it down for you. The button above that we have as sunlight, so that'll quickly give us a change between sunlight, the polar opposite being in like an indoor setting with these kind of lights, auto white balance in the bottom, and the far right is our custom white balance 1. So whatever we've currently set up here in the Kelvin setup, depending on where we're shooting, that's always our way that we can just jump to custom button 1, and it works really good. Up top, what I do love about the GH5 is that you get so many different options of places that you can save your favorite settings, all things, so frame rates, picture profiles, shutter speeds, everything. So we typically shoot in manual for this main mode here, but then C1 we have routed to identical settings that we're currently using, only 60 frames a second, and it bumps the shutter up to 125. So if we just want to quickly shoot in 60 frames a second, we have that all in there. We can just pop it in, start shooting in 60 frames, get what we need, pop it right back, and we're ready to go. Same picture profile, shutter speed where it needs to be, aperture where we kind of have it, and then we can adjust from there. The C2 button we actually have routed as 180 frames a second, so it makes the shutter speed 320, the frame rate 180, and that's in 1080. And then we can just adjust accordingly for what we're shooting. We do that maybe once or twice, a couple times during a wedding, not a ton. It really depends on if something really seems unique and we want to capture it in 180. And then with C3, the cool thing about C3 is that you actually get C3.1, C3.2, C3. And what we actually do with these is when we get to a ceremony, for example, a speech, or let's say first dances, something where we obviously check our exposure and check all our color and everything before we start. A lot of times I'll get everything set up for something like the speech, and then I will save it to C3, 1, 2, or 3, have it all set up perfectly, so then we can adjust settings all we want for something like the entrances or the first dances, shoot things however we want, but know that if the speeches come immediately after, we just pop it in C3 and whatever preset we've saved to that, and we know that our color is right, our exposure is right, our white balance, everything, because we can test that in advance. That way, if you have to adjust anything else, if you suddenly have to go get another shot for cocktail hour or go do something else, you don't have to try to adjust on the fly when the speeches come. You know that the speeches are going to be lit the same and the person's going to stand in the same place, so you can just pop it in C3.1 and you're ready to go. And then I do the same thing sometimes with other things like ceremonies or anything that I know I may shoot again later and I can test. I can put it in there and then not have to worry about jumping back and forth between it. And it saves me a lot of time. That's something we just started doing maybe 2 months ago, and I don't know why I didn't think about it earlier. It just makes a lot of sense for us. And then the only other dial I ever really change is this one here, which I usually have all the way to the left or right there for time-lapse movie mode, and I will just throw it into aperture priority or manual or whatever I want to shoot in, and that's how I'll record any time lapses. I don't really use that much for weddings, but I use it quite a bit for vlogs, and it's pretty convenient. So that's it. Hopefully that was helpful. That's just how we have it set up. That is not telling you that's how you have to have it set up, but I was like knowing maybe some things people are doing that might save me some time. So I figured I'd do an update because a lot has changed since the last video. We'd love to know what you're shooting on and what your settings are as well. So tell us in the comments below if there's anything you think would be helpful for us. We always love learning as well, but that's gonna do it. My GH5 settings, hopefully that helped.